got an email from one person saying, why am I getting so much email from the college? Because there are a lot of things going on at once, like invitation to the AGM, continuing competence reminders, PDAP, all that. So that's PDAP. The next thing I was going to talk about, as super briefly, is our national group, the Alliance and Labor Mobility. We're developing, or looking at developing, not only our national recognition so that a full registrant from any province can move anywhere across Canada and be immediately recognized without anything further, any further assessment. And that has always been kind of the basis of our mutual recognition agreement, but it's being taken to a little deeper level now because federally, now my grammar might not be quite right here, but all the provinces agreed at the federal level to the federal government that they would implement within their province the basic principles of the Agreement on Internal Trade. And this is a huge document that is very dry, but one section does relate to the professions and the ability to move across the country. So in our bylaw amendments that I'm not going to talk about very long, we have to add a section to that for a class of registrant that can come into the province without having to write the national exam. Now, if the national group, the Alliance, makes other agreements with other provinces, they will fall under that same recognition. We're looking at the possibility of an agreement with Australia and New Zealand. They approached us about that, and we will be looking at an agreement with the US. They have an agreement right now with Dietitians of Canada, which was appropriate at the time when Dietitians of Canada registered dietitians. They don't do that anymore, so we've approached the US, what are their initials? ADA-CDR, Commission on Dietetic Registration of the American Dietetic Association, and they are certainly willing to talk with us about an agreement with between two regulatory groups, so we're going to be looking at that. Yeah, that's enough for labor mobility. What else? Oh, legislation. I've talked about this before and put it in the updates in that we're looking at amendments to the dietitians regulations and our bylaws. We had to do a quick amendment to the bylaws. You may remember last December, right before the Olympics, we had to include a new emergency registration class in order to allow dietitians in the US military to register immediately in Canada, if not pre-register, to provide services in the event of a catastrophic event, which we're all extremely glad did not happen. So what I thought kind of neat part about it is that it included the US military considers dietitians as one of their key healthcare people. So we were right in there with the physicians and the nurses and that. Unfortunately, the Canadian military doesn't see dietitians in the same light, but because it was the US coming to Canada's rescue if anything happened, we were drawn in, and so that was kind of neat. Anyways, we got a new class of registration. We had one registrant register for that. But in our amendments that we're looking at now, Peter mentioned a couple of things that we're looking at including the vitamins, minerals, agents that we made the agreement with pharmacy about. The government is in favor of that, but we need to put it in regulation, which means it's totally legal. It's not just an agreement. And we'll have to do a lot of consulting, hopefully not a lot, but consulting with physicians, nurses, and with the pharmacists, probably in some cases as a group, to make sure that they're all comfortable with it. And we're looking at some other things, like possibly injections that came up from when I did the provincial liaison sessions. For example, injecting vitamin B12 or insulin in one case I was told people were doing. And so the ability and the knowledge and skill to inject is something people need to learn. So there might only be 2 or 3 people that need that, and we may or may not get it from the government approved, but we're looking at that. And also some lab tests like Peter mentioned, so we'll see how that goes as well, but we've got some work ahead of us with that. Bylaws, we're also looking at a registration category for non-practicing dietitians, and that was a request that came from you. So we're looking at that. It would allow you to not practice, obviously, but retain the title of dietitian. And a lot of people were very concerned about that if they retired or went on whatever, an education leave, that they couldn't use their title. And now they will be able to use it if they go non-practicing, but they have to specify that they're non-practicing. And there are some advantages in that I won't get into. So, how much time do we have on the video thing?
Another 25 minutes.
Oh,
Total.
well, I won't talk that long, I promise. We have another project coming up that Peter mentioned was initiated by the Patient Relations Committee, and now the Quality Assurance Committee is taking it on, called the Jurisprudence Handbook. And this relates back to labor mobility. Under this federal agreement on internal trade, people can move registrants from one province to another without further assessment, except for local jurisprudence, which really is our basic provincial laws. What is the framework for practice in BC? So a dietitian coming to BC from, let's say, Nova Scotia may not know what restricted activities we have. I mean, may not know that you have to register with them separately, whereas in Nova Scotia you don't. So people need to know these things. They need to know how we work as dietitians in British Columbia. So the Jurisprudence Handbook is being put together by one of our very capable consultants who's in Kelowna. Evelyn's up there. And what we've done is we purchased the handbook from the college in Alberta for a very reasonable price, and we're able to adapt it and recreate. Evelyn was very creative, recreated some of the sections to better reflect BC practice. Now, what we're going to do next is the Quality Assurance Committee is reviewing this pretty fat document and get feedback. It'll go back to Evelyn if it's extensive, or we'll do any minor revisions ourselves, and then it will be put online, and an exam will be added to it. And it will be for new registrants, whether they're labor mobility, new graduates, whoever, new people. So you won't have to do it, but it will be available to you if you'd like to do it. It could become part of your continuing competence program if you like. And you will go through the exam electronically, and the idea is that you have to know. So if you get an answer wrong, it'll bounce you back into the part of the website where the right answer is, and then you'll have to read it again and back and pick the right answer. So you basically keep doing it until you get it right. And and once you get it right, we will register you. But I think it's a really important piece that we're adding to our public protection section of our mandate. So we're looking forward to having that. Now the electronic exam probably won't be in place until sometime next year. Cost-wise and that, we're just probably going to delay that move until after the fiscal year. Any questions on that? It's kind of a fun project, I tell you. Nope, okay. Next point, restricted activities project. We have had a project on the go to look at the competencies that might be needed and the proof of competence for the restricted activities. And we had a very thorough comprehensive report put together and recommendations that went to the registration committee and then to the board. And we have a lot of thanks for the two consultants who did the work on it, Jan Greenwood and Liz Da Silva. And the board has made some recommendations. They read everything, and they have asked that it go back to the registration committee for some further review before anything changes. So right now, as of today, the way it sits is we'll continue with registering for restricted acts the way that you are currently doing it. Okay, and there may be changes in the future, and we'll just get to them when we get to them.
Would that change for the next registration period?
There may be some changes, but I don't know, because the committees only meet 3 times a year and the board only meets 3 times a year. The next time the committees and board are meeting are like January, February, and it's too late already for April 1st or March 31st.
It'll likely be in the 2012.
I think it'll be at least another year, I'm pretty sure. but I can't speak for the committee or the board, obviously, so we'll wait and see what happens, but that would be my guess. Peter's nodding, so as chair, he knows.
Thinks he knows.
Okay, question?
Yeah, hi, Deanna from Cranbrook.
Oh, Deanna, hi.
Hi. I was just curious if there's been any discussions, and maybe you would know, Peter, about swallowing assessments being a restricted activity. I don't know if there's been any discussion. I noticed in the Dietitians of Canada competency, there's zero mention of swallowing assessments, and I am finding interns coming out, they have zero training, and we do all the swallowing assessments in East Kootenays, so I'm curious.
Yeah, we haven't discussed that really thoroughly at the board level. We're going to look into it, but there's two aspects to that. One aspect is the government has set legislation, it's still in draft, as to what a restricted activity is, so we don't determine that. And we can't say, oh, we don't want that to be a restricted activity. So so anything that enters the body or is manipulated within the body is considered a restricted activity because it's of greater harm. So any kind of an injection where you're really piercing the skin, or like drastic things like setting bones, delivering babies, nutrition, enteral, parenteral, because it's internal, those are restricted activities. There's like 6 pages of them. And so a swallowing assessment only becomes a restricted activity when it involves
The administration of a contrast agent.
yes.
Okay, because it's going beyond the level of the pharynx or larynx, right? It's something being ingested. But if you're just conducting an oral exam for the purposes of trying to determine how someone can manage at a mealtime, it's well within the scope of the dietitian, and it's not considered a restricted activity.
It's considered part of scope of practice, and there are a number of things that are considered part of scope of practice that a lot of people might never do. So right now, that's where it's sitting. Now, some of the other colleges have gone ahead and obtained, they've had enacted in their regulation restricted activity for swallowing assessments, like speech language people, and I'm not sure who else, OTs? I don't know.
Occupational therapist.
Yeah.
But the restricted activity involves the administration of an oral contrast agent, meaning barrier, right? So nothing more than that, because if you're asking about whether the college can take a position as to whether or not swallowing assessments is part of the scope of practice of a dietitian, well, to deliver optimal nutrition and hydration is part of the scope of the dietitian.
But I guess my point is, if it is part of our scope of practice, and I think we all agree it is, should we not be including it, mentioning it somewhere within our college or somewhere within our Dietitians of Canada competencies? Because we're not teaching our interns anymore
No.
in some areas.
And I think you're right, and I think there's a number of things that are in scope that are not able to be taught at the entry to practice level. They're more advanced practice level, but still within scope. But I think you're right, perhaps there needs to be a statement that this is.
I'm bringing it up actually because the SLPs now have their college for the first time.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
So it's going to be more of an issue.
Yeah, and the SLPs also have what the government they keep changing their model of legislation, so they have now what's called certified practice. So the speech language registrants will have a certificate saying that they are certified to administer. So the actual assessment or interpretation is a knowledge level, and that's not a restricted act. That's what you know and what you see. So, but I understand your question, Deanna. Thanks. Mary, you had a question?
I was just going to comment. I thought it was pretty clear, at least I assumed, because there was talk, like in the different communications from the college, about
Yes.
being aware of your skill
Yes.
to practice those swallowing assessments. And if you know that you don't know anything about them, then you do not do them.
You're
And you
absolutely
refer
right.
to somebody that does.
Yeah.
So,
Same with any other
yeah.
procedure that a dietitian would do. Robin?
So it becomes an operational requirement to train the people coming in, because your site has different levels of practice, and it's not an entry level practice per se, but I'm in the same position as you, and I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah.